the guy, we need a trigger man, we got to get the right trigger man because obviously we're in a war.
Russia.
Yeah. I want to have a sort of media literacy lesson, Gons. Are you ready?
Sure.
So here's one thing. We know that the Nord Stream pipelines have been blown up. We know that individuals such as Polish politicians, EU elected officials, people like that have hinted at the idea that it was the US that did it, not Russia, of course. For those who are in the know, immediately knew that it was the US. I mean, it's just such an impulsive instinct now that
Sure.
when something like this happens, you're like, yeah, of course we did it. Especially when everybody starts saying it was Russia. And we kind of went over the whole thing. Now, there was some chatter in different locations on some podcasts. I saw in some kind of blogs, some tweets, some vlogs, and some tweets, people talking about how there had been U.S. warships stationed in that exact spot just days before the explosion. Okay, I said, that's very interesting. Let's find this out. Were there some American warships in the area of the Nord Stream 2 explosions recently? And let's find out. And there was we went so deep to say like that it was an underwater warfare team that was the, it just made it sound very suspicious. Okay, so I said, that sounds that's too perfect. Let's find out. And so I start doing some searches. I start, turning on my VPNs and privacy things and trying to trick the algos and try to use some different things. And I cannot find a single source for this idea that U.S. warships were there. At least nothing that, it's all just like weird blogs and outlets that don't give any sources, don't say, they just kind of type it in and press enter and let it go. But I did find a lot of mainstream articles coming out saying, there were Russian warships, though. Russians were there. Let us tell you how the Russians were there, right when they say that Americans were there. And I go, okay, we got to we got to start somewhere. And so I did. I started with this headline from Newsweek. And I say, let's see what they have to say. And there's this headline from Newsweek. And as we know, as we've followed from the Harvard media funding chart, Newsweek has some mysterious funding and also has some funding connected to known CIA outlets. So you got to keep that in mind while we read this. This headline from Newsweek is Russian ships spotted near Nord Stream pipelines before explosions. Report. And I'm not going to read the whole thing. In fact, I'm going to go to about the center of the article, because the first half of the article is, there were some Russian warships in the area. We clocked the Russian warships a little bit before the explosion. So obviously, the Russian warships did it. Okay. Now, keep in mind, Russian warships go in and out of the Baltic Sea all the time. It's their main naval thoroughfare, because if they're not in the Baltic Sea, the only other coastline Russia has is the Arctic Ocean, which they do use, but they also use the Baltic Sea quite often. In fact, it's a regular place that is under constant surveillance forever, just because we keep an eye on Russians, the Navy. And so they're always there. We're always watching them. But halfway through this Newsweek article, things got a little twisty-turvy, Gons, and it started to read like this. In a statement on its Telegram social media account, the embassy, the Russian embassy, mocked claims from U.S. legislators who, quote, perhaps have a better view from the top of Capitol Hill. Quote, but if that is the case, they must also have seen the U.S. warship activities at the very site of the Russian infrastructure disruption just the day before. The statement read, quote, or noticed drones and helicopters fly over there. So you have the Russian embassy in America on their Telegram channel making the statement that U.S. warships were there the day before the explosion. Let's continue. The statement did not say which American warships were in the area, but Russian news outlet Lenta.ru said on Wednesday how a U.S. Air Force helicopter had been seen near the pipelines the night before the accident, citing data from flight radar. Citing data from flight radar. So the Russians have actual data from flight radar about a U.S. Air Force helicopter. And the strangest thing is that Newsweek is reporting it. You know, they're not calling it a Russian conspiracy theory. They're not calling it a baseless claim. They're not calling it, they're just saying, yeah, a Russian newspaper, a news agency, cited data from flight radar, which is a pretty commonly used service. There's a few different ones you can use that stated that Air Force helicopter was in the area. Okay. It's weird they called it an accident, but okay. So there you go. We're citing flight radar data about a U.S. Air Force helicopter in the area. The Russian embassy statement also referred to U.S. Navy exercises, quote, with underwater explosives that have been conducted in the same area some time ago. So that is the statement from Russia, okay? So they still have not called this false. They have not called this a conspiracy theory. They have not called this anything. And that is the end of the claims from Russia. Then Newsweek, on their own recognizance, continues with this. Earlier in September, U.S. Navy amphibious assault ship USS Kearsarge took part in exercises in the Baltic Sea. Washington has dismissed Moscow's claims that it was responsible for damage to the pipes. Okay, so it is reported fact acknowledged by Washington that we did have some naval amphibious assault ships in the area this month.
Doing exercises.
Why
are they always doing exercises and drills near the locations where events happen? It's just
where things just happen to happen.
Man,
however, it continues. The Russian embassy said the energy trade between Moscow and Europe was an eyesore for the U.S., which had been seeking to squeeze out Moscow as a competitor on energy market and get allies hooked on American imports of LNG, liquefied natural gas. This is an obvious. This isn't even a conspiracy theory. I mean, there's there's video of Biden complaining about this exact thing. Quote, "We insist on the need for a comprehensive, objective examination." Now, so this is being reported directly from Newsweek, potentially a CIA outlet. Seems to be that way, at least. They are not calling it a conspiracy theory. They're not denying anything. They're not using any of the usual language to try to, to discount this. And in a way, in a strange sort of twisted way, this is actually a return to actual journalism. You know, they're not putting any activism on it. They're not putting any spin on it. They're just telling you the facts, which is, yeah, the U.S. thinks everybody's saying it's Russia. However, Russia says it was the U.S. and says there were U.S. warships. And yeah, factually, there were U.S. warships. Washington denies it. But, it looks like the U.S. might have a reason for this. But, whatever. We're not going to call it baseless conspiracy theories, etc., etc. And I think, and we've noticed changes, pivots, if you will, in the strategies of the U.S. media. It's part of our job is noting shifts in MOs. And it seems as though I would also refer back to the Vox article from last episode, where they were just happy to talk flippantly about alternative facts or alternative views. Or now in Vox, they actually called it conspiracy theory because they're so edgy and cool. But in Newsweek, they are simply reporting what used to be relegated to fringe blogs, fringe podcasts, people having to dig in, get their YouTube channel kicked off for saying such crazy things. They're just getting ahead of it and putting it all in the report. Even not so long ago, something like this, they would report the story about how it was Russia and Russia's evil, how they blew up their own pipeline because Putin's crazy. And then they would post a different article and they would fact check. They'd fact check these claims from Russia Telegram channels, or they would say, listen to this crazy conspiracy theory from the Russians who are taking over our media, stuff like that. It used to be very, I don't even know what the word is, but that's how our lives were reading the media.
Symbiotic relationship between like an alt news platform or blogs or whatever and the mainstream.
A bivalent strategy when it comes to reporting the mainstream narrative and simultaneously debunking conspiracy theories. It was this bivalent sort of strategy. Now, just with this Nord Stream explosion, it seems like news outlet after news outlet has completely changed the strategy, whereas put it all together, report the facts. If you don't want people to think of something, you just say it, and you just say the Russians said it. Okay. It's kind of like a dog whistle. Like the Russians said it. So it's fake, but we don't need to tell you it's fake because it's already fake because the Russians said it. It is really marking a strange new era, I think. And I think we're going to be seeing this more and more. And why? I don't quite know. I think to a degree, it might take the power out of what they would consider to be the conspiracy theorists' hands. Hey, we'll just put it out there. So when people inevitably do come across the idea that there were U.S. Navy ships there, then they will have already heard it from us, and it's not so forbidden. It's not so taboo. It's not so, deliciously, anti-authoritarian, because we'll report it, and that way we can take the power out of the conspiracy theorists' hands. Something like that. I don't know exactly what it is, but that seems close to it for me. What do you think?
Well, you have the ability to scapegoat someone, in this case Russia, which is not a new tactic, but also point or at least lay out the facts in a way where the only person making the connection is the enemy. We're not making the connection. If you make the connection, that's on you. But that sort of tactic, interestingly, I think this is more of how it was like before things got a little wild in the 2010s. Yeah, I feel like a lot of news, mainstream news, would write articles about something and looks really kind of boring and milquetoast, but they'll have stuff in there. If you read through it, it's like, oh my gosh, they literally say like, oh yeah, they did this experiment. This is like a factual thing or whatever. They've been doing that for a long time. It was sort of I don't know. It's not sensationalization because I think people are just connecting dots. It's sort of the focus on those facts and the dot connecting. That became
the fact that the fact that for the past 10 years, they wouldn't report this part of the story, and it would be left up to the alternative outlets to report it, I think is part of what made people not trust the mainstream media in the first place. Part of me thinks maybe this is an attempt to try to regain the trust of people.
Maybe. There's some of that.
Because I think it simultaneously has the potential to both regain the trust of people because you're reporting the things that you would try to hide from them before, and you're taking the power out of alternative media's hands, because people, if they feel like you're reporting everything, then they may not go to alternative media.
Right.
And it might be a long play. Like, it's not going to change with this one event or this one article. And so we'll keep an eye on it. Like, if it continues to happen, that will be really fascinating. And it'll be fascinating for us in our job, because it means that there's another like strategy we need to learn and know how to point out and like find the flaw in and find the agenda in. So I'm kind of excited for it. Gives us something new and exciting to focus on when it comes to analyzing and deconstructing the mainstream media.
But also beware, Basil, because some of the claims that we make are pretty crazy. And if that's the kind of stuff that they're just like, yeah, yep, that's what it is, then, it'll be trouble.